Okay. We're starting. I'm going to talk about 10 things that are somewhat different because of the way Pesach is. It's not terribly unusual that Pesach should start on Shabbos. That happened this year, Touch 9 Tes. It's going to happen next year, Touch 9 Tes, the same thing. Next year's Ibiyar, it's going to happen the same schedule. That Pesach is going to start on Shabbos. It's not unusual at all. And the things I'm going to talk about, some of them, particularly the first one, are probably not halach l'maisa. But some of them are more l'maisa, so interesting, hopefully it will be. Okay.
You were worried there wouldn't be a crowd here because they're Pesach.
Yeah. Forget about Kashrus, right? Forget about it. We'll start talking about things that have nothing to do with that. Okay.
I want to stick with Kashrus.
That's right. Okay, that's it. Okay, the first one. Okay, the first one is, looks like the Hebrew is not working. Okay, all my words are in Hebrew on this slide, so you're just going to have to guess what it says over there.
Pictures.
What?
Pictures.
There's no pictures. Okay, so no, it doesn't say Ashkenaz. Okay. The first one is Korban Pesach. Okay, and that is you're allowed to bring Korban Tamid. This is the one that's not halach l'maisa. We hope it will be l'maisa, but for now it's not. You're allowed to bring Korban Tamid from after 6.5 hours into the day. That's the ikar din you're allowed to. On a regular day, it's a mission in the beginning of Pesach Parkei. On a regular day, they push it off 2 hours to 8.5 hours into the day to give more time to bring karbanos, because you can't bring karbanos. Most karbanos can't be brought after the Korban Tamid. So they push it off for 2 hours, and then it takes an hour to actually, the whole procedure takes about an hour. On a regular Erev Pesach, they push it back to 7.5 hours, that's in between, because the Korban Pesach is a Korban that has to be brought after the Korban Tamid. So they bring the Korban Tamid back a little closer to the real time, to the earliest time, because they want to give people time to bring the Korban Pesach. Have all these people have to bring the Korban Pesach. When Erev Pesach comes out on Friday, like it is this year, then they bring the Korban Tamid at 6.5 hours, at the very earliest time that you're allowed to. And the reason why they do that is because people have to not only bring the Korban Pesach, they have to roast the Korban Pesach also before Shabbos. So there's a lot that has to be done. So that you bring, and everything has to happen after the Korban Tamid. So they move the Korban Tamid back all the way back to the earliest time, 6.5 hours into the day, just after charoses, and then it gives them the most time to bring the Korban Pesach. Okay, that was number one. You bring it before the Korban Tamid. No. So I guess it's a busy day. It's a busy day. What? After Tamid? Okay. So that's not on my paper, unless you could somehow read it into the box. Okay. This is going to be funny because. Okay, because I don't know if I should bother doing this to you. Okay, everything's in Hebrew. I guess the font didn't transfer well. Okay. The second is like this. Person comes, we're going to have a few that are like this. A person comes to Seder, and they realize that they forgot to make a zeroah and a beitzah. They're sitting there, and they realize they didn't make it. Okay, so on a regular year, what should the person do? They should make it right then. You can cook on Yom Tov, but you have to eat it on Yom Tov. So on a regular year, a person who realized that he comes to Seder, he didn't make a zeroah and a beitzah, so what you do is you should make them. And then he has to eat them on Pesach. There are those who hold they actually eat the beitzah at night, but most people would just do it by day. By the daytime, they have to eat the zeroah and beitzah, and then come the second night, they have to do it again. They have to again cook one because they didn't move for the second Seder, and then they would eat it again. Okay, that doesn't work on Shabbos.
So you don't regularly eat the beitzah by the Shabbos?
Some people do, some people don't. I think most people don't. It's a Taz. There's a Beitzah who eat the beitzah at the Seder. They add the beitzah from the car, or they eat at the Seder. That's correct. You're not allowed to eat zeroah. You can't eat zeroah. Okay, so what does the person do for Shabbos? Okay, so things like this. The Gemara that says, the Gemara from which it comes that you're supposed to have the zeroah and the beitzah, it doesn't say the word zeroah, it doesn't say the word beitzah. Okay, the Mishnah says you should have shnei tafshilin. Okay, and this, if I'm counting correctly, there are 4 days in the Gemara what you're supposed to do. Okay, what those 2 tafshilin are supposed to be. There's 4 different days in the Gemara what they're supposed to. If I'm counting correctly, what you're supposed to use. It's a machlokes Rishonim how we paskin. The Shulchan Aruch paskins, like many Rishonim, like the most kal shita, which is afilu garmu bishula. Okay, what does afilu garmu bishula mean? I'll tell you, garmu really means a bone. But the Ram point out this is a separate thing, not yet to Shabbos. They point out when the Gemara says bone, it obviously does not mean a plain bone. like some people sell bones. They call them shank bones. They just sell the bone for Pesach. Of course, that doesn't work. You have to have meat on the bone also. They sell the bone as a put on your Pesach, on your kara. People.
The church don't
What? What?
The church tries to put
They just sell a bone and say, use this for your Seder, but they don't put any meat on it. Okay, so that, of course, is no good. The documentary brings it. You're not allowed to use that. But the Gemara means is that Gam Bishul means is even if it's a bone with a tiny piece of meat in it, and Bishul means is even if it's the soup that you cook or the broth that you cook with the meat in it, it's also kosher. And the shot of that means is you could use anything, any two things you want, you could put onto there. So the minig is. The Torah brings some minig already, and it's brought in Shulchan. That's the minig. The minig is to use a roasted piece of meat, zechel Korban Pesach. The one tafshel of zechel Korban Pesach to use a roasted piece of meat to make a zecher to the fact that we can't have that meat which would be roasted. We can't have, so we put a piece of roasted meat onto the thing. And some people have the minig to use a zeroah to use because the Ransham should be guileless with his zeroah and the tuyah, or he was guileless with his zeroah and the tuyah. So they use a piece of meat, a certain piece of meat, and the shank is the leg of the animal to use a piece of meat. Some people have a minute to use a fliegel, which Prim Gum says he's not sure where that came from. But use a piece of meat, okay, a piece of meat that's roasted, okay. What? Yeah, okay. So the minig is used for that one to use a piece of meat that's roasted, but and particularly use zeroah. And for the other one to use a beya, there's a shaila whether it should be cooked or it should be roasted. And the Rabbah talks about roasting without cooking, which you have to watch our video to see if that's even physically possible. And the how to make set bikara. We have a video. Have it promo. Yeah, a video. How to set
How would you do it till now without your video?
What's the big difference roast without cooking?
It's exposed. Okay.
Hold it over fire.
And it's exposed. That's what happens. Yeah, can't. If you cook it first, then you can roast it. We've tried it. We weren't so successful. But anyhow, okay. So but that's all of that to use a beya that we should cook it or you should roast it. The Rambam says to roast it for one shita, to be summer for a shita, all kinds of reasons why we use a beitzah or it's right. Okay, it's all fine, all kinds of reasons. But all of that is just a minig and a chumrah. If it comes to Pesach, comes to the Seder, the guy, it's on Friday night, and the guy realized that he didn't make a zeroah there. So what should he do? He should put anything onto there. Okay? Avil, Garma, Bishul. It doesn't make a difference. Put two things onto the Ka'ara. So, listen, it would be nice to cook a piece of meat. Mistama in the house is a piece of meat. He's going to eat over the whole yontif. There's probably a piece of meat he can put onto there. But doesn't even have to be roasted. Doesn't mean anything. Avil, Garma, Bishul. The ikra thing is he should put on anything. And of course, that's what he should do. No, of course. Gamra Bishul. And the point of Gamra Bishul is to say, put anything. One of the shittas in the Gemara before it is, you could put on, you remember this from Bishalakim, you could put on what's the word of the Gemara? No. A few dog ubeish olive. Okay, the Gemara says that's a different shita. That you can even put a piece of fish that has egg on top of it. It was a shayla bishlock, and it's considered two minim. That's even considered counts, even though it's only one thing. It's a dog with egg on top of it, if you like that, and put on top of it, that's also considered the amount of nothing. Put anything on top. Okay.
So if a Jew would leave a mashu with meat on, that would be okay?
Sure, there's a mashu.
No.
So originally there was not a mashu. And then they got that actor. They put on the mashu. It has to be just something. So it doesn't be a lot. Just something.
Mayach doesn't help. It's not mayach in it.
I don't know. I don't think so. But
It really should be. Here, except for the side. That's the charoses. That's a mitzvah.
okay, number three. I'm sure if you can guess what number three is, right? We're going to sort of go in order of. You can see number three. Sorry, I said that. I'm sorry that the font's not working. You can just enjoy the numbers. Okay, and the third is like this.
It's like eight marriage for a little.
The first thing the person comes to by the Seder is the first choice is kiddush, and there we've talked in the past about the shaila of what the shears the person has to drink for that revius, and so there the Mishmur points out that usually in the mix of our choices and is a derabanan, so we make about what the shear has to be. So the shear ranges from, we'll say 2.9 ounces all the way up to 5 ounces in the chazanish, all kinds of a range. For most people, I'm not going to machmer till Chazanish. We machmer for Ramosha also, who says that 2.9 ounces is okay also. We talked about that once before and why that should be. But for the first night of the Seder, with there, the mitzvah of kiddush is a d'oraisa. So there, people are machmer. The Mishnah talks about you should be machmer to use a larger shear, which for our purposes we'll use the number of Moshe says 4.4 ounces to be a little bit more. Okay, it's not so clear exactly how that works because the wine of kiddush is not a d'oraisa. The wine of kiddush is d'rabbanan. So it's not so clear that the wine is a d'oraisa. You want to be machmer, so you want to be machmer if you have a suffix. If you make kiddush, you'd be machmer to do the mitzvah. Should you be machmer to have a bigger shear? That's not so clear. But that's what people do, to use a larger shear for a kos. Yes, but I'll tell you afterwards. Okay, when I find it. Okay, it's on my paper here. But okay, number 4. Okay, number 4. Okay, there's an unusual thing that's going to happen.
Tell us what it says.
I'll tell you in a second. Okay,
how does they get Shabbos to share the cup?
Because on Leil Shabbos, the first cup is a cup of kiddush, so that's a larger share. Okay, the din is. I'm going to start not with the Shabbos part of it, okay? The din is, you're mechuyev to say Hallel standing up. Okay? You're mechuyev to say Hallel standing up. Okay? By the Seder is the only time that we know that we say Hallel sitting down. Okay, what's Pshat? Why do we say Hallel sitting down by the Seder? And the reason is because it's a derech eretz to say something in a chair, relaxed, and that overrides the point that you're supposed to say Hallel usually standing up is overridden by the need for derech eretz, and therefore we say Hallel sitting down by the Seder, even though you're not allowed to say Hallel sitting down, you have to Hallel standing up. For that exact same reason is why on Kiddush, but with the first kos by the Seder, and havdalah on the second night, everybody sits down, even for vayechulu. Usually the din is you mechuyev to stand up. Vayechulu is edus, and a person mechuyev to stand up when they say edus. So even though that's the din, and you mechuyev to stand up, and some people stand for havdalah also, but even so, by the seder, the person is mechuyev to sit down. You sit down for kiddush, even though vayechulu you're supposed to stand up. But for the seder you're supposed to sit down. The derech eretz overrides that. What?
I stand.
Every week.
For vayechulu? Okay, I'll have something for you also in a second. The Chok Yaakov in Tav.
You sit down every week. No, I left the kiddush. That's the number which I don't know to say.
Right, I was going to make. Okay, Tav Ein Gimel. Chok Yaakov Tav Ein Gimel Sivkat and Dalet, and the Mishnah Berurah in Tav Ein Gimel Sivkat and Gimel said that by the Seder everybody sits down for a kiddush. And the reason is because the list about the derech eretz is also it's in Hallel Tav Chav Beis. Sivkat and Chav Ches in the Mishnah Berurah.
You mean like this regular Friday night you stand for a
Correct. But by the Seder you don't. You have to stand by vayechulu. If that's considered an edus, you have to stand up, except for some people. But everybody else stands up. Okay, that was number 4. So that word of this is vayechulu. It didn't come out very well. Okay, number 5. Okay, we're getting there, Yankee. Number 5. Okay, what happens? Now, this is for the second night. This is for the second night. A person who forgot yaknahaz. Okay, he forgot to say havdalah while he's eating kiddush. Okay, so the din is like this: if the person remembers during the Suda, or a person remembers after the 4th kos, then they make havdalah right then on another kos. Okay, and I should have mentioned what the issue here is that you can't just get up and make havdalah at certain parts of the seder because it's near kamoitzav al koses. It's near like you're having an extra kos, and therefore you can't do things that make it look like you're having an extra kos. So for Ashkenazim who make a bracha on every kos, there are very few places where you're allowed to drink extra. So if a person remembers in the middle of the Suda, there's the middle of the evening, they go, oh my gosh, we forgot to say yaknaz, then they can make havdalah right then. And also, the Mishnah says you should do it, if you remember after the 4th kos, you should do it then also. But any other time, the person should not make havdalah, and he should wait until he gets to the next kos, and with the next kos, he should do a yaknahaz, sort of. Essentially, do a yaknahaz then, okay? He wouldn't take the kiddush bracha. Sfardim make only bracha by the first bracha and the 3rd. They don't make. So they're allowed to drink at different places than we are, because they don't have to make the bracha.
How would you make the bracha?
Okay, so listen to that. You don't say kiddush. There's no kiddush part of it. Yeah, no, I wasn't following, but he says, yeah, no, I believe him. Okay, now...
I say, it's not golfing, then they don't know. Yes,
right, so...
The first two questions to get
I think the problem is, I remember the problem there is because you have to make hagafim again.
Right.
So if you had in mind, you could drink wine again.
Sure said they should have in mind in case you forget to do a save. You should have in mind that you might drink between the first
I don't remember what the Rishmur says. That could be right. He talks about that because of this problem. I don't remember. Maybe.
2 years ago, I had a very...
If he had him...
2 years ago, I was at a stadium with an interesting Shabbos. Somebody thinks like has, but whatever, instead of saying I'm not going kiddush l'kiddush, he said I'm not going kiddush l'chayil. So I told him that's Meshanim, that's Beitzah Tavach Chacham, and he has to say havdalah again by the Hashem Da'alonu. He doesn't have to do Ner. He didn't have to do Ner.
He did. Okay. Okay. Good. Sounds good to me. Now, I seem to remember that consumer answers. I don't know why they would have answered this question. I had this. It's in my head that recently a consumer answers. I don't know the answer. He says, well, let's say the guy forgot havdalah. Okay, so you tell him to make havdalah later because he wants to know if he's allowed to eat karpas then. Okay, because he didn't think havdalah yet. So I don't know why I think the consumer answer. Why would a consumer ask that? Well, should I eat karpas if I forget yak in the house? That where it was? Maybe that's what it was. I saw it someplace. Okay. So when should he eat his karpas?
Not inside.
Right, that was that's right. So maybe that's what because I don't know where I saw it. Okay, fine. Okay, number 6. Okay, number 6. I assume that he could. Yeah, okay. Okay, number 6. Okay, Rabbi Eisenbach. Okay. What?
Moshe Feinstein said you should make before Shabbos.
You should what?
Kol Deiri B'Shem Moshe Feinstein says you should make havdalah before.
The Shulchan Aruch says you should what?
Yeah, but make havdalah before eating the rest.
Because it's not near commercial places. It could be. Okay. So number 6. Okay. The person number 6 says, as well you could read it. Okay. The person forgot to make salt water. Okay. So on a regular year, he would just make the salt water. Okay. What happens comes Shabbos? So there, the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to make a little salt water. It's better not to make salt water on Shabbos. It's questions in Shabbos about making salt water. So let's pause for a second and think for a second. Why do we have salt water in the first place? Okay, so if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, okay, the Gemara says you should be tayvel. Look in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says v'yikach mihakarpas pachas mikazayis umetavloi b'chaymitz. Okay, you should dunk it into vinegar. Okay, the Ramah before him when he talks about how to set up your car, he says you can put a vinegar or salt water onto the table b'chaymitz or meimelach. What's the reason? It's because there's a Mechakis Rishonim about this also. The Gemara just says with Toivel, you dunk it in. The Rambam holds you mechuyev to use charoses. I'm sorry. The Rambam says you should use charoses. Okay, other Rishonim hold you bedafka should not use charoses. But those who hold that you bedafka should not use charoses because it'll get mixed up with the maror, those who hold you bedafka should not use charoses say you could use anything. Okay, and the reason, if you think about it, the reason why you could use anything is because the reason why we do this Toivel. I don't know what you call how you pronounce it anymore. The dunking this stuff in the first place. Why do we do that? Okay, so either it's because everybody used to put their vegetables into water before they started eating, so it's like a beginning of a soup. That's the way people put things in, or it's to mimic the way you're going to do with maror later on. So the reason why you're doing it. It doesn't make a difference what you put it into. The Gemara doesn't say anything about you. The Gemara doesn't say what you're supposed to put it into because it doesn't make any difference what you put it into. So we paskin that we do not do it into charoses. If I remember, it's Beitzah who says I think it's Beitzah who says the reason we don't do it is because the Rambam holds you're not mechuyev to do in charoses. It's just a mile to do in charoses. He holds you could be yotz with other things also, and we bedaf hold to not do it, so we don't do it in charoses. We dip it in anything. Okay, so anything means anything. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch didn't say even to do it in salt water. He says do it in vinegar. The Magen Avraham says the minig is to use salt water. The Rambam says you could either. The Magen Avraham says the minig is to use salt water. Okay, that's very nice. But when the person comes that they didn't have it, they take anything. Okay, so it doesn't really make a difference what the person would take. And most people have vinegar in their house.
Duck sauce. Why don't you make a little bit?
So there's talk back there in Shin Chav Aleph about maybe it's not such a great idea to make salt water. Even little bits, it's not so clear.
I guess if we're afraid the person's going to make a mistake and make a little too much.
Okay, so if that's the reason. It's not so clear the person should, and if that's what he should do, but he doesn't need to, because he can use vinegar also, he can use other things. Okay, like he said, he wants to use Dutch. It wasn't clear to me. I don't know why. I don't know what the reason is, but, I mean, it's in Hilchos Shabbos, which is not surprising. It's in Hilchos Pesach, and if it's on Shabbos, then this is what you should do. But I don't know why it's worth Shabbos. I don't really know what the reason is. It's a zero because of Ibn. It has nothing to do with, it's not a Shabbos. It shouldn't be, well, I don't know what the reason why it's more common. I know Mishmur says, and if it's on Shabbos, this is what you should do. That's it. Okay. Number 7. Okay. I can't believe no one said number 7.
So what is that? So you're not going, you should not make the salt water on Shabbos.
Right. Do something else. Use anything different. He said Dutch, so Dutch is fine. Okay. Okay. So the next one, this I thought was the one people would say, is that the charoses brings a question which is actually connected to what I said something before, and I'll mention in a second. The charoses on the bottom of Mishabur, the charoses, I wasn't pronouncing that correctly. The charoses says that at the end of the bracha, at the end of Magid, the bracha right before the second kos, we say min hazevachim min hapesachim. Okay, a person makes the bracha that he should eat, that we can eat min hazevachim min hapesachim, and so he brings a shaila whether you should change that when it comes Motzei Shabbos. If the Seder is on Motzei Shabbos, which is our second Seder, if Shabbos is the first day, then Motzei Shabbos is the second day. The shaila whether you should change those words to min hapesachim or min hazevachim, and the reason is because you wouldn't bring the korban chagiga on Shabbos. And therefore, if Pesach were to fall out on the Motzei Shabbos, then we eat the pesachim first, that would be on Shabbos, and we eat the zvachim on. We eat the zvachim on. So the Shari says, and the other side says, it's not for this year; it's for whenever it's going to be. We show in Mirza Hashem next year we should do that. Okay, so that's what he brings it. The Shiloh. Most people change it. Okay, most people do change it.
I've always asked that we should change it based on the previous next year.
So you should always look at next year's thing. Okay. That's the right. That's true. We'll do our PR year. That's true. Okay. So the Shabbos brings both days of it. Most people do change it. It doesn't make such a difference which way you do it. Okay.
The Rebbe Herb saying the Baal Torah Tmima says it's a printing mistake.
What is a printing mistake?
The whole thing originally was Beis Mem Shin. They thought it was B'Matzai Shabbos, so according to him, it says B'Mishnah Shkolim. When you look over there, and you see something, it was a tzion, the whole thing was a printing mistake.
Okay. What? Okay. I'm good with that. Okay. It's good with me. Okay. Number 8. Trevor, you missed it. My font didn't work in the numbers here just in boxes. Number 8. Okay, number 8. Number 8 is if a person forgot to prepare charoses. Okay, if you're following, we're sort of in order. Okay, a person forgot to make charoses. So if it would be on regular Yom Tov or regular Seder night, what should the person do? The person should do it with a shinui. Like the example, if you hold his grinder upside down, it's a little bit of a shinui. He can grind up his things for charoses. Okay, on Shabbos, things are more complicated. In order to do a shinui on Shabbos, to do toichin on Shabbos is more complicated, so a person would have to do that. It's more complicated. You have to do like a double kind of a shinui to do it on Shabbos. It's that much more complicated. So now related to that, it's not exactly about the charoses about it. If the person would be using horseradish for maror. So the Nesivus, in his Haggadah, called Maasenisim, in his Haggadah, says that you're mechuyev to eat the horseradish whole. Okay, just bite into the horseradish whole. He says, why are you mechuyev to do that? Because the Gemara says you can't, if you cook your horseradish, it takes away from the strength of it, then you're not Yotze Mitzvah. He says, so by grinding it, why do you grind it? Because it makes it not as strong. That's an obvious reason to grind. When you grind it up, it gets not as strong. And therefore he says you're not allowed to grind it up. You're mechuyev to eat it whole, just bite into the horseradish. Okay? And on which the Chayyadam disagrees with that. And he said the Gra didn't do that, which is what most of us do, is if we eat horseradish, we eat it ground up. And he says, and he's machalik, and he says, just a sort of an aside, he's machalik and says that the difference is the reason why, if you cook the horseradish, I believe we once talked about this, if you cook the horseradish, If you cook maror, then you're using an outside item to dilute the taste. So what you're doing is you're using, in this case, water to cook it is diluting the taste. That's what makes it possible. But if you just don't change it, you don't use anything from the outside, you just change its form. Like in this case, you grind it into small pieces instead of into big pieces. And that releases oils and makes it just be not as strong. That's okay, that you're allowed to do that. And he actually said, you're mechuyev to do that, actually.
Not the water, if you roast it and bake it, that would be...
If you did it without any water...
Without any water, you put it on fire.
I don't remember specifically, but the impression is that would be okay. The point, the chiluk is whether it's using outside factor to change it or not. If you just like roast it, then... What do you say?
Fire is also an outside factor.
No. Fire is... Why is fire an outside factor? Because you're roasting it, as opposed to cutting it up. That's the same thing itself. Oh, okay. Maybe I have to think about that. I never thought about that. I never someone tried to roast it, I guess. Okay, so now, what happened was like this. So the Chayyim says that the grower used to do like this. When he had his maror, he used to even ground up. How did he do it? The problem was, if you grind it up, then it's going to be not strong at all. Okay? It's not clear why that's no good. But it would be not strong at all. So he said, the grower would either do one of two things. Either he would grind it the day beforehand. Either he would grind it the day beforehand and put it into a covered container. That's one way. Or he would grind it at the Seder. Okay, right by the Seder he would grind it. So, the Mishnah says, really the preference is to grind it at the Seder. That way it's nice and strong. Okay? It's not clear why it has to be stronger instead of... I'm not clear what that is, but you should do it at the Seder. Now, if you're grinding at the Seder, like I said about charoses, you have to do with a shinui. Okay, so you would grind at the Seder. Except, if it was on Friday night, then you should do the other way. Then you should do the other way and grind it before Shabbos. The teichen on Shabbos is much more complicated, and therefore you should grind it before Shabbos and do the other Beitzah of the Chayyim, which is to grind it beforehand and leave it uncovered. Okay, leave it covered until...
In Shulchan there's a simon, perhaps about grinding tavdinim on Yom Tov being different than grinding other things.
Okay, could be.
I would assume that horseradish is a tavdin.
I don't know. Okay, number 9. Okay, number 9. Number 9. The Gemara says... The Gemara says, it took about charoses, but number 9 is also about charoses. The Gemara says, tzarech l'kiyuhe, the tzarech l'smuche. Okay? Tzarech l'kiyuhe means it has to have a sharp taste to it. It means you have to use lemons in it, so it should have a sharp taste to it. Okay, that's one thing. And the tzarech l'smuche, that's tapua. The tzarech l'smuche, and you have to make it thick. You have to make it thick. Because it should be like cement. Okay? So it has to be thick. Okay, that's what the Gemara in the Bavli says, that you have to make your charoses to be thick. Okay? Yerushalmi has a shaila whether the charoses has to be thick or thin. Should it be thick, presumably like this Gemara, like the Bavli says, so it should be like cement, or should it be watery, and it should be red like blood, to be a zecher, the way they were there, that should be zecher for the blood of Yidden who were killed in Mitzrayim. Okay? So the Yerushalmi has a shaila about that. Okay? So, what's the din? So the price can say, well, the din is, the Bavli says, tzarech l'smuche, you have to make it thick. So the din is that you're supposed to make your charoses thick. Okay? But the Rama says, in order to be possibly yotze, the sheet in the Yerushalmi that says you should make it watery, what you should do is, right before you're about to use the charoses, right before you're about to use it, pour in some red wine into it. Doesn't help white wine. Pour red wine into it, so that the wine, that wine that will be sort of with it, will get not so absorbed at this point. It won't be so absorbed, and therefore it'll be thick, but it'll also be watery. In other words, if you put it in on Erev Yom Tov, it's not going to help you anything, because it's going to get absorbed. In which case, it'll still be, you'll be missing the watery part of it. So Rama says, I have an eitzah, how you could have it thick and watery. You could be beginning to both sheeters. Have it really make it thick, and then at the end you pour in a little water, and the water will get a little absorbed, and that'll be there, but it'll also be on the side, so it'll be a little watery, and it'll still be thick magically at the same time. Okay? So the Mishnah brings, it's a Dakimash that says that if it's on Shabbos, you can't do this. His concern is that by pouring in the wine right at the time that you're about to use it, if you pour it in, it's a problem of lisha. Okay? It wasn't so clear to me how it's lisha. because the whole point here is to not mix them together. Lisha means is to mix them together, but his concern is that it's going to be lisha by putting the liquid into a solid. That is a potential lisha. Again, I'm not so clear how that's a shayla of lisha here. And there are ways to do lisha. There are ways to, so to speak, do this kind of a lisha. But Mishmur brings, but if it's on Shabbos, you should not do this. Okay, so for this, now most people don't do this altogether. That's the truth. Okay? Most people don't do what the Ramah says a lot of people have thick charoses. That's not so uncommon to have thick charoses, but not that the Bavli says. But not so many people either remember or know that they're supposed to put in wine right before they use it. That's well after his person who's forgot it right by kiddush. So most people don't remember that, but on Friday night this year, you feel good if you don't do it because you're not supposed to do it. Okay.
Better enough to me is if you forgot to make the charoses, you're making it by the singer.
Yeah.
So you have to put the wine first.
Then as far as the lisha part of it, that's for real lisha. That's true. But I'm talking about this extra part. The Ramah says you're supposed to put in wine in the last second. As you're about to use the charoses, you should put in some wine. That you're not supposed to do when it's contents. Okay. And then
I'm going to do the other way around. We put the charoses into the wine. Every year, before we use it, we put the charoses into the wine.
Right before you use it?
Yeah.
That's what the Ramah, then you're trying to do what the Ramah says, which is you're supposed to have...
He says put the wine into the charoses.
I don't know if it's not ma'akav which one comes first. The point is, it should be thick and liquidy. Also, you'd have a lisha.
As far as lisha is concerned, if you just put the charoses into the wine, then there's no concern that you're going to come to do lisha. If you pour the wine in, then perhaps...
So you think here means it's like zeroah? If I put in some wine, I might do lisha? Okay, I hear. Okay, maybe the problem is when you dunk the mortar into it, that will be the lisha, because now you mix them together. I wasn't clear. Okay, and the last one, which you also can't read, the last one is like this. When Pesach starts on Shabbos, you can't read it? I don't remember what it is.
Grinding for
No.
Well, 7 was the
You can't read? I don't think you can't do. Okay. This is for a class in learning disabilities, He says that you should know more, and can't you read what it says there? And the kid just sees boxes. What does he want for you? Leave me alone, Okay, anyhow. So and what happens is when Pesach starts on Shabbos, that means is Achron Shal Pesach will be on Shabbos as well. For us, Achron Shal Pesach will be on Shabbos. So, as everything points out, you're mechuyev to make an Erev Tafshilin for the last days of Pesach. Okay, now, the question for us is, that's okay, you're mechuyev to do it, that's fine. When a person makes Erev Tafshilin, it's based on the assumption that I'm going to cook on Friday in order to have food for Shabbos. That's why I'm the rice. I'm allowed to do cooking because the food that I'm cooking might be suitable to someone who's going to show up at my house. I'm going to feed it to him. If he doesn't show up, I'll have it for Shabbos. So with the rice, it's really okay because of that reason. Then it's a drabanan, blah, 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 go on and on. But I have to start with the thing that's hoil that I can eat it. So the question that people ask is, if they want to cook gebrux on Shabbos, on Friday, they should have a knedel on Leil Shabbos. Okay, on Leil Shabbos, they eat gebrux on Shabbos. So they want to cook the knedel on Friday. They can't cook them on Shabbos. They want to eat them when it's going to be Shabbos. So the person wants to know if they could cook that food on Friday to eat it on Shabbos. Because on the one hand, you're allowed to cook. You have an Erev Tashilin. On the other hand, you're not. Okay, so this.
I guess might want to eat gebrux.
So the beginning of this shaila starts off. There's a bunch of modern Achronim talk about it, but it starts with the shaila of Rabbi Kiveger and Chassam Sofer. Right? Rabbi Kiveger wanted to know. They used to make. I don't know exactly what it is. That doesn't appeal to me. It sounds like some kind of a knish that had raisins inside of it. Okay, it doesn't strike me as what my kids wanted to eat on Pesach. But he wanted to know is could they make that? They didn't eat raisins on Pesach, but they ate raisins on the 8th day of Pesach. And a lot of people didn't eat dried foods on Pesach, but they ate on the last day. So the shaila was, they wanted to cook on Erev Shabbos, they wanted to put this food away so they could eat it on Shabbos. Okay, they wanted to be able to eat that food on Shabbos. So it was the same kind of a question, which they don't eat it today, but they eat it tomorrow. Could they cook that food? Okay? So, Rabbi Kiveger says, the reason why you're allowed to do it is because maybe he's going to come a chayla, and a chayla is allowed to eat raisins on Pesach, and so it's hoyel and the glory archim. So somebody might show up who's going to be able to eat these raisins. A hoyel would be allowed to eat raisins on Pesach. Some Sofer said to me, he says, yeah. Then you can do anything because the hoyel might come. He says, what's the chance that a hoyel is going to come that Daf can eat raisins? I mean, Rabbi Kiveger has a right from a case of a hoyel might come. He says, but that a hoyel might come to Daf can eat raisins. It seems like far fetched. He should be able to do that. What?
It's not clear.
No, it's not within range to say, if you say that, then everything is mutter.
Take that to Kashrus, when I take Korban the Kashrus, everything she mutter because I have to take Korban the Kashrus, so you pay for that.
And he said,
Shliach.
right, so that's the same answer. That's what he brings from that it's not considered, so to speak, in the Pikuach Nefesh we use the word, we say, no, which means, why would you be choishish anything? Okay, now, so the Chazanish and Dayan Weiss talk about it in that question, and also in another question, okay, a different question, which is a variation of that question, which is, for there, they live in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz Aretz, it can never be that the last day of Pesach is on Friday. But in Eretz Yisrael, like this year, the last day of Pesach is on Friday. So we could never have the last day of Pesach on Friday, but they can. So the shayla they want to do, they want to cook kidneys for Shabbos. Okay, they want to cook their kidneys foods on Friday that they can eat on Shabbos, which they're allowed to eat. They're allowed to eat. Once it comes Shabbos, they're allowed to eat that. Okay, so they talk about linking in that. So the same kind of a question is, could you eat it? Because maybe someone will eat it. And then there's an extra twist to it. Okay, which is think about Eretz Yisrael. If you're cooking kidneys, okay, there's loads of svardim around. It's not a far-fetched thing that a person want to come in. How many cholim are going to come that are going to want to eat raisins? But there's fighting around. There are people, lots of people who can eat kidneys. Oh my gosh, look at how many hashgachas we have on food that are kidneys. We have people who can eat it. Okay, those people. If I remember, it's in Dayan Weiss. If I remember, he says maybe in the place by Rikaveger there was nobody who ate raisins. Okay, he could have had the same thing. Also, did he have people around? But he said maybe there was nobody in those places that ate raisins. But think about by us. Let's say I had to eat kibbutzim. Let's say I didn't eat kibbutzim. Okay, but my next door neighbor might eat it. So when I'm cooking, I'm thinking hoyle. I have to think hoyle. Maybe a hoyle will come who needs kibbutzim. What do you mean hoyle? Hoyle for my next door neighbor who eats kibbutzim. He might come and he won't eat it. So the hoyle seems simpler in that case to be able to say that. Well, the kidney is hoyle because of the svardim. So the Chazanish is meko. The Dayan Weiss brings that in the Luach of Rav Tukachinsky, I hope I pronounced that correctly, it said you're allowed to do it. So you're allowed to cook on that Friday for Shabbos. But Dayan Weiss is not so happy about it. The hoyle doesn't bother him so much. He has two other things that he's more concerned about. He has lots to say about it. You should see the truth. He has lots to say about it. But he has two other issues. One is the din is that if a person is fasting on that day, on that Friday, you're not allowed to cook. So he declares that maybe it should be considered like a person who's fasting. A person who's fasting is not allowed to cook, even though other people can eat. But since he can't eat, he's not allowed to cook. So he wants to declare whether it's the same, because the mice says, I can't eat this kidney today, or I can't eat the brocks or raisins, or whatever that thing is. I can't eat that thing today, even though other people can, but I can't. That's like one side. That's one thing that he's not having. And the second is, he wonders if maybe there's an issue to cook kidneys. He says, wait a second. If the guy's cooking on the 7th day Pesach, he's cooking the food that he's not allowed to eat. Should be ushered to do it because he might eat it. Okay, the guy's sitting on cooking on Friday. He's cooking up a big pot of rice. Well, he's not allowed to eat rice on Friday, and maybe he shouldn't do it. The Dayan Weiss is not so thrilled. So that's what he talks about. We talk to make isser.
How I also?
Yeah.
That is exer.
Well, just like yes, there's a din that you have to put away your chametz to kiddushes. So whatever he declares about that, whether he's not thrilled about a person doing the cooking. The Chazanish is more meko.
What's he talking about? Kidneys?
Dayan Weiss is to make kidneys.
That's what I'm saying. But to cook the brocks and calamari for sure can cook.
Cook the brocks and chametz. There's nothing wrong with cooking the brocks.
So if you don't want to make anything, you make it cook. You broke the brocks on Thursday. You can make it knedlach.
Okay, I guess you could.
If you really need it, he'll say you can manage one day without knedlach.
Every other day, except okay, let's say that.